The Sahel breeze cut through the dusty streets of the small town of Wahiguya in northern Burkina Faso. It was an ordinary day, with opaque skies and stifling heat. In the heart of the old town, a small group had gathered around an old colonial building, where a cast-iron safe rested, covered with ancient symbols carved with ancient precision. Time had worn away its edges, but something about the safe seemed to resist its own oblivion. Many said that inside it lay a secret buried for generations, something that could change everything, but no one knew how to open it. Among the curious, who approached discreetly, was a man with calm steps, simple clothes, and a serene gaze. His presence did not attract attention, and perhaps that was why no one said a word to him. Some thought he was just a civil servant or an old local professor. Interested in African history, he looked at the safe with a deep gaze, not of curiosity, but of recognition. It was as if he already knew what was there, as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. In the shadows, the man's eyes roamed over the carved details, almost as if reading a coded message. He said nothing. He simply touched the side of the safe gently, and for a second he seemed to feel the pulse of something ancient. The people continued their routine, ignoring the symbolic weight of that moment. What no one knew was that this simple, silent man was not just another spectator. It was Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, disguised among his own people. And that key in his hands, it had been kept for centuries for the day when Africa would begin to awaken again. As the man in simple clothes examined the safe, the dull sound of boots echoed through the courtyard. It was Commissioner Dembele, a local security officer known for his exaggerated pride and his aversion to outsiders who pretend to be intellectuals. With his impeccable uniform and shiny sunglasses, he walked with his chest puffed out, commanding respect not through wisdom, but through fear. When he saw Traoré leaning over the safe, Dembele frowned in disdain. He approached, and in a loud and hostile voice asked, "Hey you! Get away from there! This is no place for curious people." Traoré, calm, slowly looked up but said nothing. The silence he maintained seemed to further provoke the arrogance of the commissioner, who now looked down on him with disdain. "You think you can touch this just because you read a few history books, huh? Don't meddle where you're not wanted." The audience around him, not knowing who the man who was being harassed was, remained silent. Some laughed discreetly, others simply looked away, as if this humiliation was something routine, yet another reflection of Africa that has not yet reconciled itself to its own worth. Dembele, now feeling in control, took a step forward, lightly pushed Traoré's shoulder and blurted out, almost spitting out the words, "Do you think you know what's in there? This is a matter for the state, not for a bum who thinks he's wise." It was at that moment that the air grew heavier. Tension hung like a silent storm. Traoré looked at the safe, then back at the commissioner, but still, he didn't say a word. His silence was beginning to say more than any shouting. Minutes passed since the confrontation. The commissioner walked away, laughing disdainfully, thinking he had won yet another pointless argument. But something began to change in the atmosphere. The elders present, those who still carried the weight of history in their eyes, felt it. An almost mystical murmur hung in the air. A griot, an elderly storyteller, slowly approached, leaning on his staff carved with tribal symbols. His eyes fixed on Traoré, and he murmured softly, as if he recognized someone whom fate had chosen. "This safe, it does not respond to impure hands," the griot whispered, looking at the commissioner in the distance. It was sealed with the blood of our ancestors. Only those who carry the living memory of the land can open what was left to protect Africa. From itself, his words floated to Traoré like a warm breeze of ancient wisdom. The president, still unknown to everyone there, listened, but remained silent. He knew that this moment required more than words. It required presence, a light. Wind began to lift the dust from the ground, and the sun, which had been opaque until then, broke through the clouds, illuminating only the safe. People began to fall silent. The commissioner looked around, uncomfortable with the sudden silence. Traoré then approached the safe again, this time with more determination. He took a small object wrapped in red cloth from his pocket. It was the key, a golden artifact forged centuries ago, passed down among silent leaders who never forgot Africa's true role. And in that moment, time stood still. Traoré held the key as if it were an extension of his soul. All eyes were fixed on him, but no one yet knew who this calm man was, with restrained gestures and intense eyes. The commissioner, still with an air of superiority, crossed his arms and snorted, "You're wasting your time. This safe won't open with fairground tricks." But the moment the key touched the slot in the ancient iron, a sound echoed like muffled thunder. It wasn't just the safe opening. It was history, finally, breathing again. The heavy lid creaked and slowly opened, revealing an inner box lined with ceremonial cloths and symbols of African resistance. At that moment, 3 black armored vehicles pulled up in front of the courtyard, and armed soldiers climbed out in absolute silence. Everyone froze. One of the guards walked straight up to Traoré, saluted, and announced loudly, "Your Excellency, the perimeter is secure." It was like a bolt of lightning striking the crowd. Total silence. Even the wind seemed to stop. The commissioner turned pale. His posture crumbled like a house of cards. "Your Excellency," he repeated, trembling in disbelief at what he had just heard. Some people backed away, others knelt in respect. The identity of the man he had humiliated in front of everyone was now fully revealed. Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary president, was there, in flesh, blood, and dignity, among the people he had sworn to protect. And with a simple action, he had torn down the masks of arrogance with the weight of the truth. The entire courtyard fell into a deathly silence. The revelation of who this man was touched something deep in each of those present. Shame, astonishment, admiration. Commissioner Dembélé, previously haughty, was now trembling. His hardened face was distorted into expressions of panic and confusion. He tried to justify himself, stuttering out words, but none of them made sense. The people looked at him not with anger, but with disappointment. His arrogance had been exposed in front of everyone, and there was no uniform that could protect him from the truth. A woman with a white headscarf and calloused hands slowly approached Traoré. Her eyes were filled with tears. She said nothing. She simply knelt and touched the ground in front of him. Others followed suit, not out of fear, but out of respect. Respect for someone who, despite being the country's supreme leader, mingled with the people as an equal. That day was transforming before everyone's eyes, from a simple warm morning to a spiritual milestone of rebirth and awareness. Meanwhile, the griot, watching everything, recited in a low voice, "The man who hides among the humble is the one who carries the strength of the ancestors. The power that is not displayed is the most feared." The words echoed like ancient poetry in each person's heart. Dembélé, now isolated in the midst of the crowd that ignored him, felt the weight of his mistake. He had not only disrespected a man, he had spat on the very essence of Africa, represented there by Traoré, and that echo of regret would be a ghost that would follow him for a long time. Traoré remained standing, looking around with the same serenity with which he had arrived. There was no anger in his eyes, only a calm firmness, as if he understood that true justice does not require shouting or spectacular punishments. He gave a discreet signal to his bodyguards, and none of them touched the commissioner. It was unnecessary. The silence surrounding Dembélé was condemnation enough. The people now saw clearly the difference between imposed power and power conquered through integrity. A young journalist who had discreetly filmed the entire scene with his cell phone approached hesitantly. "Mr. President, what do you have to say about all this?" The question hung in the air, waiting for a monumental answer, a historic speech. But Traoré simply looked the young man in the eye, smiled slightly, and replied calmly, "Sometimes you have to be mistaken for the little ones to remind the big ones of what really matters." That was enough. The words fell like a silent thunderclap over everyone. Without fanfare, Traoré turned around, carefully picked up the contents of the safe, which was still wrapped in the ancestral cloth, and handed it to one of the elders present. Then, with firm steps, he walked back to the cars that were waiting for him. There were no speeches, no applause. There was only reverence. True justice had been served there, without spectacle, without revenge, only with truth, conscience, and morality. African dignity had spoken louder, and silenced even in the days that followed. The video of the incident circulated throughout Africa. Millions watched the scene in disbelief that a president had walked among the people, without an escort, without arrogance, only with the certainty of who he was and where he came from. Many wept, others were ashamed, but everyone reflected. The story left by Traoré in that ancient courtyard transcended the moment. It became a symbol, not of the authority of office, but of the power that comes from humility and ancestral conscience. The box removed from the safe was taken to a council of traditional leaders, historians, and spiritualists. Its contents: millennial records of tribal alliances, ancient maps of Pan-African trade routes, and symbols that revealed the forgotten union of kingdoms that had once ruled together before the arrival of colonizers. It was more than paper and ink. It was a reminder: the destiny of Africa does not lie in international treaties, but in the collective memory of its people. Ibrahim Traoré did not comment publicly on the episode again, but weeks later, a single sentence was published. In an official statement, the true key to the future of Africa has always been in the hands of those who know its past. This message resonated in hearts like a silent call, an invitation to conscience, and many understood that that day in Wahiguya was not a political act. It was a ritual of rebirth. And rebirth begins with respect. In the end, the image that remained in the collective memory was not that of the safe opening, nor of the soldiers arriving. It was the story of the simple man, dressed in ordinary clothes, who faced contempt with dignity and responded with silence. Traoré's true power lay not in his position, but in his conscience. He did not need to impose himself to be recognized. He simply had to remain true to his essence. Because true respect is born of example, and his example crossed borders. and awakened dormant consciences. In the safe, perhaps the most valuable secret was not what was kept, but who was able to open it. Africa, so often plundered and silenced, was now beginning to recover its voice. And that voice came from those who walk among the people, not from those who hide behind titles. The episode spread like an ancient breath, reminding every village, city, and nation that the time of submission is over. The future belongs to those who dare to remember who they are. The camera slowly moves away from the square, now empty, with the wind blowing gently on the lid of the still half-open safe. The narration ends in a solemn tone, like a chant. When a leader walks as a brother, he does not just guide, he awakens. And when Africa awakens, the whole world listens. Fade out, silence, rebirth.